There was a Sunday school teacher. She was very vividly recapturing the story of the Good Samaritan. And it got a little graphic, and then there was this hushed silence. And she asked, what would you do if you saw a wounded, bleeding person laying by the road? And they were all quiet, and the one little girl goes, well, first, I think I might be sick. Oh. I can see why Jesus used this setting as a place to talk about the Good Samaritan, because this road, and you're going to see, this is the new road right now of the Good Samaritan road, the road from Jericho to Jerusalem. And you can see it's modern now. But this road is windy and it's in an isolated area, and I want to show that's what it would look like, and you know what we can think it could look like in Jesus' day. And so it was isolated and a place where people could get in trouble. People can lay waiting, and that's what was happening today. It's a dangerous road with a giant isolated gap. No sign of life for miles. And in the day of Jesus, it was known as the Bloody Gap. It reminded me of westerns that I used to watch where they would have to have protection going through some of those places out west so they wouldn't be attacked or ambushed. Do you know those places? When I was going to San Diego to annual conference, we went through some of those California places where it was all desert and rocks, and it was up in the mountains, and there were a lot of places that people could lie waiting. I'm sure there are places where we might not go. You know, when we go to Chicago, people always say, oh my gosh, you're going to Chicago. Well, don't go to the south side of Chicago. Don't go there, because it's not good. And so there might be places that you might deem unsafe, even here in Elkhart or in Goshen. We might not call it the Bloody Gap, but you might feel uncomfortable about going there. Unsafe. You know, the annual conference was in Charlotte, and it was a beautiful city. It was so clean. I just thought it was wonderful, and first time I experienced it. And we had some conversation with some people along the way, and we were telling them how much we liked their city. But one evening, the last evening, we decided we were going to go out and just kind of cruise the city a little more, because we stayed about a half a mile from the conference center, so we got an opportunity to talk to people in between. But this night we decided we were going to go a little bit farther. And as we walked, we saw a girl gang. How did we know that? All dressed in red. Red handkerchiefs around their head, red shorts, red shirts, red tennis shoes. And they looked like they were having a good time, and we passed them on the sidewalk. We didn't think anything of it. And we kept on going, and we visited some places out in the outskirts of town. But we asked them at our hotel, we were talking to them about the city, and we were saying that we had seen this gang of girls. And they said, oh, you don't have to ever be afraid here in Charlotte, because the police do not put up with that. They will not ever hurt you, because the police here in Charlotte won't put up with it. And that gave me something to dwell on, because it seemed to be a peaceful environment. But I saw that as peacekeeping. Peacekeeping. And there was a gap in that effort between keeping peace and really making peace. It seemed to be all peaceful. And it was good to keep us safe. And don't get me wrong, but is that really what God wants for us? And there was this gap there, that there were still people marginalized on the fringe that were being kept to peace, rather than having real peace. You know, that's God's dream for us, to live in a shalom, where we're living in harmony, where there's wellness and wholeness and healing in our lives. Not just peace. not just that false peace. I looked at it as a false peace. That really, when she said that, I was like, that gave me something to dwell on. And I could see like this huge gap between what we think we have and what we should be having. And really, does that solve anything in people's lives? Because Christ gives us a true and lasting peace. It's a shared vision that Christ has for us as the body of Christ, as the church. It's a shared vision that we embrace in community. Walter Brueggemann says, if there's to be a well-being, it will not be one just for isolated, insulated individuals. It is rather security and prosperity for the whole community. And that's not just in the world. How about just here in our church or in our families, in our own little neighborhoods? Young and old, rich and poor, he says, powerful and dependent. He says, always, we are all in it together. All of us, God's blessings. We receive the gift of life. And Christ brings that for us. Christ helps us, reminds us, Christ Shalom, that we belong together and that we're all in humanity. Christ bends low to care for us, as the Good Samaritan bent low to care for that man along the side of the road. So what if we decided we were going to have that vision in our head all the time? What if we decided we were going to be about healing and wholeness everywhere? Would we start to see opportunities for healing and wholeness, for lasting peace? Would we be able to teach the peacekeepers what it really means to have peace? I saw some great ministries going on there. In fact, I just happened to be browsing this Get to Know Charlotte map that they had at the convention center, and I was browsing through looking for things that we could walk to, and here was this nonprofit restaurant called King's Kitchen. And what it did, this was a pastor who started this restaurant business, and wonderful food, wonderful dining experience, and all the profits would go to feeding the hungry. And what he would do is he would have the food, you would have lunch, and you would have the dinner hour, and then in between you would have Bible study, and the homeless on the street people or anyone could join them every single afternoon. And then on Sundays the restaurant was closed, and there would be afternoon worship. Burl and Paul and I had an opportunity to meet a homeless guy and have an opportunity to talk to him, where he was ministered there. And that'll be a conversation if you want to talk to me about that. I would love to, about how he felt about how people treated him on the street. And then I saw another ministry called Gang One, where they were doing ministry to help members of gangs walk away. Gang One. And so they were educating them with life skills and anger management and places to help them, send them in the right direction. They were setting up themselves to help bring peacemaking, a peace, maybe a lasting peace, for some of the people that maybe never experienced peace in their whole lives. Never. I was thinking about the Good Samaritan, filled with compassion. It meant like filled down to the bowels, down to your very core with compassion for this man laying by the side of the road. And he cares for this man and cares for his open wounds and carries him on his donkey to the inn, to a safe place, and pays for his boarding until he comes back through. And I was starting to think about the other two. We always look at them with kind of disdain, you know. The priest and the religious man. What kept them from being true peacemakers or coming along to helping? They didn't cross over Sometimes we have this fear of commitment. Sometimes people have a fear of commitment because they're not sure where it might lead, what we might be asked to do. What would God ask of us? It reminds me of a joke. There's a man standing with his friend, an elderly man standing with his friend, waiting for a bus, and a young man comes along and says, "Do you know what time it is?" And the elderly man just ignored him, so the young man walked away. And his friend said, "Why did you ignore him?" "Well," he said, we'd start to talk. If I told him what time, we'd start to chat, and he'd ask me where I live, and we'd find we'd have things in common. And he'd say, well, maybe I'd come over and visit you. Then we'd have him for dinner, and he'd meet my lovely daughter. And honestly, I don't want my lovely daughter marrying anyone that can't afford a watch. Sometimes when we see something, we have a hard time saying, I don't want to give all. I only want to give a piece. So we stand back and we're a little apprehensive about maybe our call and our opportunity. It's hard. Or maybe we're just afraid, physically afraid. That's real. There's a lot of people that are around that have mentally ill, and we're fearful of how to speak to them or what they might do. I talked to that man on the street, that homeless man, about that same thing, about our point of view, our fears. It's hard. In fact, the Nicodemuses gave me permission. They told me that when they came out of the convention center, somebody said to them, I don't have a gun, but I still want your money. So you're trying to have compassion, right? You're trying to have compassion, and I think you could be angry. I was angry when they told me that. You can be angry and disgusted when we're trying to have compassion. We don't know. The scholars say, well, because they could be impure, but we don't really know, and we could be them easily. I see myself as that. I want to do this, but something keeps me from doing it. Dangerous, desiring God's true shalom. It's dangerous. We know that. It's dangerous to our physical bodies, dangerous to our commitment, our time. Preconceived notions and understanding we might have to lay down. Our certainty about we think what life is. And then we think if we ask God to help us envision this shalom, what will we be asking for? Wow, I look at that picture there, and I get all that turmoil and the chaos we could have when we pass by there. We're afraid that the robbers might be lurking in the background, that we have real problem with that. But if you think about if the Good Samaritan did it once and said, okay, I'm not going to be afraid, and he came back through, and then on the next trip he found it again, and then on the next trip he found it again, and you say, oh my gosh, what is going on in this gap? What is going on in this gap that needs to be addressed? Because we can't just keep doing it and doing it. We can't, because God calls us to more and to justice. What is going on in that social location? What's going on in the people's lives around there that's causing all that woundedness, all that violence? It's hard for us as Christ followers, I think. I got to tell you, Pastor Rosanna gave me this great book that she read in her book club called Tattoos of the Heart. Oh my gosh, it's one story after another of compassionate serving and giving. And I'm going to talk to you for a few minutes about this. And then I have a short video to show you of this gentleman. It's Father Gregory Boyle, who is a Jesuit priest. And they place him in the inner city of LA, where there are 11 gangs And 8 gangs, 7 of them are Hispanic, and 1 is African American. And he has this desire to realize this wholeness and healing in this place. And all it does is charge him up. And this desire continually keeps him to go. And his congregation, they place him in this parish. And this congregation embraces this willingness to find wholeness and healing in the streets of their community. And they begin to work together. Instead of isolating the church moves out. Because they live here. They want it too. They want it too. Sometimes we just don't know what to do. Healing and wholeness. And he begins his work there. And he makes himself known in the community. His doors are always open. And people start to come. Because they find that he is true and authentic in his love and compassion for them. And no one is a victim and no one's a victimizer because they're all victims and all victimizers. And he loves them all because they're all part of his community. He can't see this. He can't see the difference. He sees them as equals like Jesus sees them as equals because they all need mercy and love. Oh, and the stories are so compelling. So he begins to start to reach out and touch them with his love, this unconditional love. And he says, you know what I do? He says, I just wait and I wait and I wait and I wait. And he waits over and over. And he starts counseling services and tattoo removals, job placements. And then he realizes no one wants to hire them. Oh, he's funny. I mean, he's really funny. You'll see a little bit of his funniness on the video. Then he decides he's going to start his own business, and it's Homeboy Industries. And it starts little at a time, but it's this huge employment opportunity for gang members. And they start to find value in who they are, and a sense of self-worth, because that's what his love is doing for them. He sees them as equals and worthy, treating them like humans. We're all brothers and sisters of mine. So I'm going to let you see this as a 3-minute clip, and then we'll just close in a few minutes and go right into communion. Thank you. I just want you to know, I know how hard it is when I'm not telling everyone to go out there and minister to gangs, but there's a place where each one of us can really receive healing and wholeness in our actions and bring healing and wholeness to each of our lives here at Creekside and throughout our community and our families. Each one of us needs that. And then as we become healed and whole, we're able to minister in a greater way. Thank you.